Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello there, and welcome to the Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot-button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. In episode 25, we will discuss pregnancy food warnings, the new faux meat, and the current diet craze known as clean eating. Here in the studios of OPB, I am joined by Tove Danovich, a journalist covering food and sustainability for publications such as Eater, Bon Appétit, The Atlantic, Fast Company, and NPR. Welcome, Tove.
Thank you for having me.
And Juno DeMelo, who writes about food, health, and travel for publications like Glamour, Vogue, Marie Claire, and Travel and Leisure, among others. Hi, Juno.
Hello.
And Virginia Gewin, a journalist covering food security and crop diversity for publications such as Nature, Science, and Modern Farmer. Hey, Virginia.
Hi, Catherine.
Well, it's almost August as we record this, and this time of year I feel so much sympathy and empathy, having been there, for the pregnant women in our midst. Their feet are swollen, they have aching backs, and for the love of God, they cannot get an ice-cold glass of rosé if they don't want to risk public condemnation. Virginia Gewin, I think your kids are about the same age as mine, so I'm going to turn to you first. When you were pregnant, did you avoid all those high-risk foods that they're always warning about, or did you ignore the warnings?
It depends on the pregnancy. The first one, I was an angel. I avoided them all. I did what I was supposed to, except for coffee. I couldn't give up coffee altogether. The second one was a bit more relaxed. I was a cheater. I definitely had a sips of beer here and there, glasses of wine, more coffee because I had a toddler. And I just didn't pay as much attention. It just didn't seem as urgent that I do adhere to all of the recommendations. And the recommendation list of what foods to avoid just kept growing. So I just, at a certain point, I just had to trust my gut and just go with it. But I'm thinking you might have been a cheater too?
Yeah, I definitely had some sips of wine here and there. But I'm thinking, as a science journalist, you probably know more about what really can harm you than the rest of us do.
I did dig. I did a little bit of research. The interesting thing is I went on Facebook to crowdsource amongst my feed, which is heavily tilted towards science journalists, and everybody said the same thing. They looked into the things that they were most concerned about, assuaged their fears, and kept on eating whatever they wanted to. So I felt good that my peers did the same thing. So a couple of the big things that people did modifications were, if you were going to eat lunch meat, you toasted your sandwich and got it pretty hot and killed anything that could be in there. And then you felt good about it. You didn't really have that constant worry of listeria was going to get you. People waited until after the first trimester or the first half of the pregnancy to indulge in alcohol. The coffee consumption was low at the beginning of the pregnancy and increased over time. So it seemed like, we were thinking very much about development, crucial moments of development, what might be appropriate at each stage. And towards the end, indulgence was just more important for sanity than anything else.
Hear, hear. Juno, you are someone who covers nutrition and health as a journalist, and you also happen to be very pregnant right now. Yes. Our audience cannot see you, so I've got to hear what your thoughts are on this.
I had a friend early on recommend this book called Expecting Better that I loved. That's by an economist. And when she got pregnant, she basically delved into every study about risk and would present a bottom line for each thing. And so for nutrition, she was really, I think she said you could have 4 cups of coffee a day. Alcohol was fine. So I kind of went with that. And I've also interviewed a lot of OBGYNs for stories and asked them. And, with raw fish, which I have eaten once or twice, they all kind of said if you've gone to a really reputable sushi place and you've never been sick and you're really craving it, it's probably fine. I've mainly stuck to pasteurized cheese. Right when I I just remembered this right when I found out I was pregnant, but before I told anyone, I went to Providore Foods here in Portland, and they gave me a sample of a cheese. And right as I was about to put it in my mouth, I saw that it was raw, and I just sort of let go and dropped it on the floor.
Oh my
and
gosh.
pretended I missed my mouth. But then I got a lot less cautious. And actually, I feel like your body kind of takes care of some of it for you, because I remember when I found out I was pregnant, I was so sad to give up coffee. And then I ended up not giving it up eventually. But for the first 2 months, maybe, it sounded so gross to me. And it's the same with seafood. Like, I couldn't stomach the thought of seafood. So it was like giving up tuna and coffee was not hard.
Early on.
Yes.
Same thing. I think the whole morning sickness, I have a pet theory that it is really your body protecting you, and it's not going to let you take in anything that you really know that isn't going to be good. Because you do have aversions, really strong ones early on, and then they go away, and it seems like those are timed to developmental points when you really have to just be pretty cautious about what you're consuming. And I think that's dead on with what everybody I know experienced too.
Yeah, Virginia, I think you're so right. I remember I feel like my diet got very basic. I wanted gummy bears and frozen yogurt and like things that I wanted when I was probably, I don't know, a teenager sounded really good to me. And salmon sounded terrible. Alcohol sounded terrible in the beginning. So it's pretty easy to stick to the guidelines, at least in the first trimester.
Right.
I found.
Well, I'm curious what you all think about. I noticed that in May 2016, New York City declared it unlawful for restaurants to refuse to serve certain items like a glass of wine to a pregnant woman. So basically allowing women to choose what they want to eat. And I thought that was so interesting because pregnancy is one of the only physical states where everyone knows your medical condition because they can see you. And so people are kind of passing judgment on you. So what do you all think of that? Were either of you ever stopped by anyone who said, put that glass of wine down?
I've never been stopped. I've had both. I've had servers not ask me whether I want anything to drink. And I've had servers kind of sheepishly ask, oh, do you want a glass? I can tell they don't really know what to do. They don't want to encourage it, but they also don't want to embarrass me. I don't think I've actually ordered a drink out, so I haven't really... No one's had the chance to shame me, I guess.
Oh, the shaming happens, though.
That's it.
Yes. A friend of mine went out to dinner with 3 other couples, and it was late in her pregnancy, and she ordered a beer with dinner. And one of the husbands in the group pulled the waitress over and said, "Could you please take this away from her?"
Oh my God. Wow.
And, this is a Scorpio woman late in her pregnancy. That's not the thing to do. She was not pleased at all. So, I mean, it does. And she had, she even had some shaming from relatives and things like that. And this wasn't, there's no egregious overstep. It was, maybe a half a glass of beer or something. But people have very strong opinions of what you should be eating, Juno. And so they encounter it.
It's funny because I feel like with cigarettes, you don't see pregnant women smoking. And if you do, it's definitely, you have the right to kind of give a mean look. But with alcohol, it's not such a hard line.
Well, by contrast, another friend had a Greek landlord. She lived on the East Coast, and every time she would walk downstairs, he would say, "Oh, darling, have a glass of wine. It's good for the baby." So, I mean, everybody's got an opinion.
Right.
Tove, I'm curious what you're thinking over here.
Yeah, as the one have never been pregnant nor have any plans to be pregnant person in the group. I worked in restaurants in New York for about 5 years in the past. And it was always really hard for me as a server to also figure out how to navigate that relationship when a pregnant person comes in, not so much because I was judging them, but a lot of people, especially, you're pregnant, things are difficult, feel very offended sometimes depending on the choice you make. So if you bring them a glass of wine, you are encouraging them, and that's horrible, and how dare you not notice? And if you don't do it, you're being very judgmental, also not okay. So I think sometimes for outsiders, too, the rules are so hard even when you're trying to figure out how to do it right that for an outsider, it's completely difficult to get in the middle of that and figure out what's going to be the best way to treat someone with respect and how they want to be treated because the reactions are so different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I imagine you also have to guess, am I sure she's pregnant
yes,
or am I not sure?
That was only the very clear, most round. And of course, this being New York City, you would still get like the very elegant women and, sheath dresses with heels. So it made it really easy to tell oftentimes on the bright side.
Talking about the situation does give me some empathy for people who are very overweight because I've heard people who have that body type saying that they have been shamed by servers who are like, really? You sure you want to order that? You sure you want to eat that? Mm-hmm. And yeah, it seems like it's not fair to the person. They should be allowed to make their own decisions, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's just, changing times too. We had a relative in town this week and my dad's cousin. And so we're all talking last night and I asked them, were there any forbidden foods when you were pregnant? And they just all laughed. Just absolutely chuckled. It was basically, as long as you wait until 5 o'clock for cocktail hour and get down to 2 packs a day, you're good. Different world.
Yeah, I actually read something that women used to smoke pregnant on purpose because the main problem with it is you have a low birth weight, right. But they wanted that because they wanted to birth a small baby. They wanted to stay small. They didn't want a hard delivery. So It was an intentional habit.
Yes, a friend of ours he was a twin, and his mom purposefully smoked for that reason.
To shrink him down.
To shrink him down.
Wow.
I've never heard of that before. That's amazing.
My goodness. Well, whenever I think of this topic, I think of the Adam Gopnik book, Paris to the Moon. I think it's essays from when he lived in France, and he still is a writer for The New Yorker. And he has one essay in there called Like a King that I would recommend anyone who's considering getting pregnant or just knows anyone who's pregnant read. It's hilarious, and it's about his and his wife's experience being pregnant in France, where it's kind of like you were saying, Virginia, with the Greek neighbor, where the doctors, they don't wear white lab coats, they wear black Prada suits, and then they treat the woman, the mother, not like a medical patient, but like someone who deserves to be congratulated because she had sex and it worked out really well. And then the doctor is constantly telling the wife, oh, you need to drink more red wine and stop eating fresh vegetables.
You're almost there, Juno.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about barbecue season. Actually, let's talk about a different kind of barbecue season because it feels increasingly decadent these days to put a burger or steak on the grill. So let's talk about the new meat alternatives that are out these days. Juno DeMelo, you published a piece in Men's Journal recently about mock meat, also called fake meat. So let's start with you. It seems like there are a lot more options lately in stores.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of options. I was a vegetarian from 4th grade until my early 30s, and then I kind of fell off the wagon and kind of back on again now. And I remember when I was young, you could only really get a garden burger, which was like a brown rice vegetable. It's still around. I still like it. It still serves its purpose. And now you can get jackfruit, I'm seeing on a lot of menus, and you can get it in the grocery store. And that's almost got like a pulled pork consistency, or that's what they try to tell you. I'm not sure. I'm entirely convinced. You can get cultured meat, which I don't believe really exists for consumption. I think that's still a lab sort of slightly far off thing. And then you can get fake meats that are meant to taste like the real thing. And that's usually a textured vegetable protein, soy, pea protein, vital wheat gluten, kind of like ingredients you wouldn't recognize in real life. I tried one that I ended up writing about. It's mycoprotein, which is a fungus that kind of was hard for me to picture, but it really tasted like chicken, which kind of weirded me out. I can't decide whether or not I prefer the ones that really taste like meat. They have some of these burgers now that bleed, and I put that in quotation marks, but they've got beet juice usually, and it kind of seeps out, and they stay pink like a real burger. Or whether I prefer a kind of bean-based burger that is clearly not a burger, but at least you can identify the bits that are in it.
My carnivore husband says the best veggie burgers aren't trying to be meat. I mean, he just, like, the whole bleeding thing, I just find that really disturbing, actually.
Yeah.
And it's just, the chickpea burger or what have you is fantastic just on its own and doesn't need to be meaty. And so, yeah, we definitely are a little averse to some of the ones that are trying too hard to be meat.
Yeah.
Have you tried any of these meat alternatives, Tove?
Yeah, I also have had an on-again, off-again vegetarianism throughout my childhood. And it's funny, my husband also was raised vegetarian until he was 17, and now he's like, I'm never going back to that. So it's really hard to make meals sometimes that don't involve like a meat part of the plate, taking up a third of it. But we do try like the Morningstar Farms things are great, the veggie bacon, all of that. But it definitely serves a very different purpose from meat. I would never say, I really want a BLT, let me put this fake bacon on it, because that's not the same sandwich at all. But it's great on its own, and it's great for what it is.
Virginia, the point you brought up earlier about meat trying to be something that it isn't, kind of what you were talking about, Tove. I actually contacted Camus Davis from the Portland Meat Collective, who has been a guest on this show before, and is actually home with a newborn after probably eating things that were on the no-eat list for pregnant ladies. But anyway, she got very deep and said these fake meats that are pretending to be meat, she called them a twisted version of Baudrillard's notion of simulacra. Basically, she was just saying this is a terrible idea, and much better for you to eat very high-quality meat and just very little of it. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when I wrote the story, I interviewed a nutritionist who basically said, nobody really needs to be 100% vegan or vegetarian for health reasons. So it's not really anything you need to do for your health. If it's something you want to do for environmental reasons, for ethical reasons, I guess it depends on if you love meat and you are seeking something that tastes a lot like meat, you might really love the Impossible Burger, for example, which I haven't had. It's only in, I think, California and New York.
And what's that?
It's a burger that's supposed to taste the most like a burger by this company called Impossible Foods, but they're only selling it in restaurants, and I believe they work closely with the chefs to make it its best burger self. You can't just buy it frozen. And it's supposed to be really incredible. So I think if you're a meat lover who doesn't want to eat meat for whatever reason, but you want the taste of meat, I think some of these alternatives can be really helpful and are pretty good at mimicking the real thing versus someone who doesn't really care about meat, but maybe you want the ease of like a veggie sausage or a veggie burger. And then maybe it doesn't need to taste so much like a burger. It can just be, like you said, like a white bean burger or a chickpea burger.
Well, on January 1st of this year, my 13-year-old stopped eating meat. So, of course, me being the good mom, I went straight to the store. She announces this. I go get every fake meat option out there so she can try them out. The fake chicken strips, ugh.
Yes, so
fake
gross.
fish sticks, ooh. It was really bad. And she turned her nose up to all of it. And so now I was just trying to find things that could fill that place on the plate. But yeah, she's found her. We've figured out. She's kept seafood, and so that's made everything so much easier. And that's been our, saving grace right there.
It's so interesting to me looking at these fake meat companies because especially when you get into the burger that bleeds or the lab-cultured meat, it's very much a mission-oriented product where they're looking ahead to, we've destroyed the planet, there are no more cows, like this is the only burger we can have. And it's so funny to me because one of the things I interned briefly at this vegan animal sanctuary, which was really fun, a whole other story, but we talked a lot about how one of the reasons that people, don't go vegan or vegetarian is the protein argument. And, you can get enough protein from all these other foods that we don't think of as being protein rich, even like kale or a cup of spinach has a few grams of protein. And then certainly once you add eggs or yogurt in, So a lot of these products, to some extent, seem to be looking for a future that, may or may not exist, but isn't maybe as necessary as we feel like it is. There's so many other foods that you can turn to get that part of your diet in. So in that case, sticking with taste is even that much more important.
Well, that's where the bug craze falls apart.
Yes. Let's talk about insects, Virginia.
Well, you've never met a more enthusiastic person than some guy who is really trying to sell the world on bugs. I mean, I get emails, phone calls all the time from these people, and they are convinced this is going to save the world.
And they want you to write about their businesses, is this right?
Yes,
okay.
They want to be written about. They want to reach that broader audience who just doesn't know yet that the caterpillar is going to be tasty. I mean, I just like... Good luck, guys. I applaud your enthusiasm. Don't know that it's going to take off.
That's a big psychological leap.
It is.
Tova, bugs and insects are not vegan, though, correct?
No, those are not. And actually, a lot of the most delicious, I think, fake meats are also not vegan. Most of the Morningstar Farms products have egg or something else like that in them, which was really hard for me when I got there and had to go to the grocery store and for the first time find all these vegan items. And I was just scanning the ingredient list. It took like an hour and a half. It was really difficult. But now I know. The bug thing is really interesting. I've been served a cricket flour muffin before. I definitely would not have been able to tell that that's what it was, which, again, if you need cricket flour in your diet, that's great to know. But yeah, it's a hard sell in full form. I've tried it when I went to Thailand, and it was not my favorite food I've ever had.
You know what I think they need to do with insects? And I think I'm stealing this from an article I read at some point, but I think they need to rename the meat, because we don't say, I'm going to have a cow burger. You say, I'm going to have a beef burger. So we need to rename the cricket body or whatever they use. Like, I was reading about mealyworm flour. I remember feeding mealyworms to my pet lizard when I was a kid. And that just oh my God, the thought of eating, But, if they called it something else, just name that protein rather than the animal itself, so I don't have to imagine it wriggling around.
I love food rebranding efforts. Like the kiwi used to be the Chinese gooseberry, I think. And they've changed a whole bunch of things before they became successful as well. It works. It works really well.
Yeah. Just think of prunes. The poor prune. It's just a
the dried
dehydrated
plum.
plum.
Yeah. They did try to rebrand it
did.
as a dried plum.
I've probably fallen for that.
Yeah.
Well, I tried a few things as we were leading up to this episode, and the one I couldn't bring myself to try again because I've had it before is the jackfruit. Juno, did you try this? To me, it's too sweet, and the strength of jackfruit is that it's all fiber. It doesn't even have any protein in it, right?
Yeah, I found the same thing. It tasted like fruit still to me. It was sweet. And you're right. It is. When I talked to this nutritionist, she said it really should be considered another serving of fruit in your day, not a protein replacement, which, most people, I feel like every study I've read, get enough protein in a day. So it's not really that you need a ton of protein, which is why I wonder about these cricket flour bars and, muffins or baking with them. I find it a little tricky. I've seen it in scrambles on restaurant menus. I've seen it in tacos, kind of in place of, like I said, or on a pulled pork sandwich. It's a little... It's not the most delicious. I'm with you. I actually have been loving, and I think they're made in Seattle or maybe Portland, field roast vegan sausages. Yes. They're really delicious. They come in like a plastic casing. I know. They're made with Vital Wheat gluten, which I think is my favorite. I think it's kind of like a flour if you took all the starch out. And all you were left with was the gluten. It's like a high gluten product.
That's going to be the new fad, high gluten.
Extra gluten. But they're really delicious. And you can just kind of... They didn't work so well to grill them because they don't have enough fat to kind of hold up on the grill. But I highly recommend them sautéed in a pasta salad.
I've had biscuits and gravy made with them. It's really excellent.
Yeah.
I, last night, was at our neighborhood pool, which has grills that you can borrow, to grill your dinner. And I brought some vegetarian soy hamburger patty meat, quote unquote meat. And I put the patties on the grill, and the family next to me said, "Are you grilling cookies?" Because they looked like brown silly putty. So anyway, that's just my closing thought.
I do not think meatless meat grills well.
No.
Sad to say.
No. But if you put enough condiments on it, you don't notice it.
Yes.
And it's not so bad. On to topic number 3. Today's hot diet trend has a name that implies smug superiority, eco-friendliness, and superlative health benefits. But some are saying it's bad for your health and not all it's cracked up to be. Tove Danovich, I turn to you. Have you ever tried clean eating, and what is it in your understanding?
I am definitely not a clean eater. I went to the grocery store last week and, the checkout person was making that very nice conversation with me, asked me what I did. I told him I wrote about food, and he looks at what I'm buying and he's like, I would not have guessed that. And it's literally half, organic produce, really fancy meats, and then loaded frozen potato skins and candy and 3 kinds of popsicles, because that's the kind of human that I am. So I am not part of that diet trend, but I can understand where it comes from. And clean eating, people have different interpretations of it, but more or less it's only eating whole, unprocessed foods. And food processing can be anything from the crazy, weird science that makes fake meat to making applesauce. So there's a really wide range of definitions for something like that. But one of the issues with clean eating, I think, comes from the title itself, which implies that certain foods are clean and therefore good, and others are really horrible and you are impure and probably a horrible person for eating them. And it's a great recipe for just all kinds of disordered eating. They even have a word for, people that care too much about health, whether it's eating or otherwise, to the point where it becomes a disorder, which is orthorexia. So there were a few bloggers that kind of popularized this, like the person behind Deliciously Ella, who has since come out against it as well, saying, look, guys, this isn't what I meant either. A lot of people are getting sick from this. It's great to eat whole foods, but my family eats ice cream too. With you being pregnant right now, going back to that, is that something that you ever think about?
I hate clean eating. It makes me it makes my hackles rise.
Me too.
I think, I love all the foods that fall under the label of clean foods. I love fruits and vegetables, whole grains. But it just feels so judgy, and it reeks of disordered eating to me. And like you said, processing can be oats that have been flattened out a little bit so they cook more quickly, or tomato sauce where the tomatoes have been processed into a sauce. And there's just so much delicious food in life, pasta and ice cream and all this stuff. And, so many of these blogs you'll see. I was looking at something the other day and they had cookie dough mint something ice cream, but it was actually just frozen bananas pureed, which is delicious. I like that. With carob chips, and the cookie dough part was totally absent from, I don't know why it was called that, but yeah, this idea that everything you eat needs to be clean is so, I don't know. It just has a very disordered eating way about it to me.
Well, because who's going to say they prefer eating dirty? I mean, that's what's so wrong about it. I mean, unprocessed just doesn't have the same visceral tug. And so it's just, I don't know. I think it's just really dangerous territory. I mean, but at the same time, it's kind of devilishly brilliant because it's such a big umbrella of what you can say and that you're a clean eater. But at the same time, it just, the judgment that goes along with it is so devastating. And you read some of these firsthand descriptions of people that have orthorexia and the ritual that they go through of how, they look at every piece of fruit and inspect it for purity and wash it and place it and cut it into these specific bites, and just to be able to eat it, to get to the point where they can take a bite of it. And it's just heart-wrenching because this is something that's really, really difficult. And then you have clean eating spread all over every single thing these days. And you can see how, there's this one specialist who was writing about this. She treats, 180 clients a year. And she said in the last couple of years, she's seen the number of people presenting due to clean eating double. I mean, it just seems kind of out of control at this point. And I keep waiting for it to, they all come on strong and then usually slowly peter out. And this one just has some staying powder, I think, because of this term. It's just like really not going away.
Virginia, yes, the term. And also, I noticed you put your hands together in a little sign of prayer when you were talking, and you used the word ritualistic. And It's funny because I was in a bar class the other day, and everyone was like standing with their hands in prayer. And I don't know what we were doing, squatting, and everyone was sweating, and everyone was so concentrated. And I thought, wait a minute, this is like the religious asceticism of 2017. People aren't nuns anymore. Hordes of people aren't going off to monasteries and, becoming religious ascetics. Instead, we're doing this weird ritual with our food and saying, oh, I can't eat that. It's not clean. It's almost like saying it's not holy. And then we're like torturing ourselves with these bizarre exercises. I wonder if it's just this human instinctual need to just, I don't know. What do you
cult of
think?
wellness.
Cult of wellness.
Religion, yeah.
No, I think that she just hit it on the head. Cult of wellness. That is definitely it. And I don't know what's driving it anymore. I mean, it's have we just put all of our faith in that now? I don't know, because we've lost our faith in politics and religion and everything else is kind of back to basics and food and body. I don't know. It's weird.
And it's so interesting and ironic that we were just talking about fake meat, which would not qualify as clean eating. So all the people who are trying to kind of clean up their act, quote unquote, by not eating meat are not actually clean eaters. Right. I'm getting confused right now.
Pieces of jackfruit would be fine. Like a live cricket.
But not if you mash it up.
A mealyworm wriggling.
Delicious. Yeah, there's such a culture of being scared of what we eat today. And part of that, there are a lot of bloggers you could certainly point your finger at, the Food Babe being one of the most well-known. But people are really unsure about what's in their food and what they're supposed to be eating and how to eat well. And this shows up, in a more benign fashion with the gluten-free eating craze. But it's still inclusive enough that you can do it healthfully, especially with all of these other foods coming out. But I think the clean eating, where it really gets out of control, is because there's no textbook for it. All you have to go on for what is clean, other than this general not processed, is if people have ever said that it might be bad for you. So then you go off and you can't have gluten anymore, and you can't have meat anymore, and you can't have non-organic produce anymore. And your list just shrinks so small every time you tick off any food that has the slightest bit of doubt around whether or not it's okay or safe. So I think it really comes from a culture of fear around our food. And as much as we're really excited and invested in what we're eating, and there's this whole restaurant revolution, people are also really unsure about what to bring into their homes and what they're putting in their bodies. And I think this is definitely a manifestation of that.
So true. Juno, I know that a pet peeve of yours is the plastic clamshell food container. Am I remembering that correctly? I'm remembering a conversation from months ago.
I ate a lot of those in my days in New York offices.
So have you heard about these New York meals where, they'll deliver 3 clean meals to you a day, and it's like $100 a day, and they come.
Yes.
Each one comes in a plastic
I actually just read Marissa Meltzer in the New York Times she reviewed, I think, Sakara Life and 2 others, and I want to say one was $375 for 2 or 3 days. And yes, it was beautiful. I mean, that's part of the allure with this food, is that it photographs really well. It looks great on the internet. It's bright. There are a lot of colors. There's nothing unappealing. You're not going to describe a chia seed acai bowl sounds much prettier and more appetizing than, oh, I had like biscuits and gravy and sausage. Like that's a little bit, it doesn't have the same appeal. So yes, I have heard about those, and I did wonder, what do you do beyond the 3 days? Do you keep, do you pay $1,000 for a week's worth of food? And what, part of my hang up with clean eating is I'm not sure I know what the promise is. It's always a very nebulous, I felt less foggy, I felt clearer, I had more energy, my skin got better, but there's no real evidence that I've seen as to what makes clean eating worth it. It seems to be about you feel better. I mean, of course you feel better if you're trying to eat healthier.
I'd feel better if I could afford to spend that much on food. I'd feel great.
I looked for evidence and I didn't find anything. I don't think because it's not well defined. It's just a fad. I don't think anyone's even, like in the academic world, I don't think anyone's ever really even looked at it rigorously to see if there was any kind of benefit. And so it just all kind of comes down to the touchy-feely kind of BS line of what it can do for you. And I don't know. I just look at that with a eye roll and a hair flick and just kind of say, I just
grain
can't
of
feel.
fleur de sel.
Exactly.
Yeah, always with these diet trends like the paleo diet and now this, I feel like there are a lot of references to this is the traditional way people ate. And I always think, well, the life expectancy in the centuries and millennia when people ate this way was much shorter than it is today. So why would I want to eat that
Also,
way?
have they watched Game of Thrones where they just eat like mead and meat pies and
Drink cider all day.
Yeah.
Well, and if you write about global food security, this just seems so trivial. It's just what is going to feed people in aggregate worldwide, and you're going to have to process some food. I'm sorry.
Although it is sad that it seems like this is a very, very upper middle class phenomenon, and only these people are able to afford what's basically just fresh food.
Yeah, I think a lot about in New York, I would see kids on the subway eating just total junk for breakfast. And I don't think it was good for them, but they seemed fine. I mean, I think there is obviously you want to eat whole grains and you want to eat fruits and vegetables. I think there's certain recommendations that are pretty roundly, we can all get behind. But beyond that, I wonder.
Yeah, it's funny talking about it being this upper middle class thing, especially if you're spending $1,000 a week on these food packages.
Maybe they only eat 3 meals or 3 days of meals a week. I don't know.
Maybe. That would make
Stretch
it
it
so
out.
much cheaper, at least. But yeah, when you think about it, thinking about food all the time used to be something that the poorest people had to do back in the day when our traditional ancestors were eating oh so traditionally. And today it's kind of flipped around where, the lower you are on the economic totem pole, the less time and ability you have to think about what you're eating. Meanwhile, all these people ordering fancy, clean health foods, that's all I guess they have to think about all the time, which is sad in its own way.
Maybe we should move on to our dessert course. And this is the course in our figurative meal where we each share something foodie or beveragey that we've been enjoying this week. And I have some special guests in the studio today in the sound booth, my children. And so I'm going to honor them. They disagree with me as to how to pronounce this brand. I think it's Kid Robot, and they say the kids call it Kide Robot. I don't know. But anyway, it's this brand that produces these Japanese-inspired pop art toys that adults collect the little figurines, and then kids collect the stuffed animal versions, and they're kind of like anime-looking toys. They're pretty cool. And they have this whole line called Yummy World, and they're all stuffed animals with faces and eyes that are food. And my kids, I think they brought their Yummy World toys today. They have a marshmallow that's covered with chocolate. They have a pizza slice, a chicken drumstick, and a hot dog. And they literally cuddle with this stuffed animal food. It's very weird. And I just went to the website today and I noticed they also have Yucky World. And sadly, a lot of the things in Yucky World are actually good for you. They're like, there's like a Brussels sprout, but they're also like things that like moldy blue cheese. I don't know. Anyway, if you're looking for a gift for a kid, definitely check out Kid Robot, Yummy World stuffies, because they're a big hit with my kids at least. Juno, did you bring a dessert item for us?
I have a very low-class literal dessert item for you, which is I all I've craved being pregnant is soft serve. Almost every day I've eaten soft serve, and I've eaten really good soft serve, and I've eaten really bad soft serve, and I kind of don't think they're that different. So all summer, the other day we drove by Wendy's, which I have not been to in probably 5 years, and all summer their Frosties are 50 cents. And it was so good. You can get a half vanilla, half chocolate. You know, it's thicker than a milkshake, a little bit thinner than a soft serve, but I thought it was kind of an ideal summer dessert. And for 50 cents, I couldn't help thinking this is not that different than the $5 artisanal soft serve that I bought like 2 days before.
So true.
So that's my literal dessert, is you should get a Frosty for 50 cents while supplies last through, I think it's like the end of August.
So you're saying I should stop going to the organic frozen yogurt shop?
Yes, just go to Wendy's.
In my neighborhood. It's like $10.
It's not that different.
Tova, what did you bring for us?
Yeah, so kind of self-promotion, but not quite. I wrote an article yesterday for NPR about all these people that collect vintage Pyrex, and it's been something on my list to write for many, many years. My grandma had the 4-bowl set with the primary colors, and I loved it so much that when I was like 19 and had no money, I spent $60 to buy a set of my own online. And it's been so funny seeing the reaction, because there are all these Pyrex collector groups online, and they're now very worried that everyone else has found out that this is a very cool pastime to collect all this vintage Pyrex and that it's out there and around. So if you want any, you should buy it now before everyone else has caught on.
I love vintage Pyrex.
It's so wonderful.
And the colors are so, it's always like bright turquoise or this lovely moss green or orange.
It's amazing how well they represent each decade, too. You can just find any of the items and be like, that's from the 70s. This is harvest gold. No mistaking that.
I'm going to get on eBay.
Mm-hmm. You should.
How about you, Virginia?
So I have an obsession with gene banks that's been going about 3 years now. So anytime we travel and there's a gene bank nearby, I have to go.
Gene?
Gene. Okay. So basically seeds that are stored to maintain diversity worldwide. So we just recently went to the Big Island of Hawaii, and I took a couple of hours and stole away from the family and went to visit the USDA's gene bank there, where they maintain the diversity of 13 different tropical fruit crops, like papaya and pineapple and guava. And I learned that as diseases are threatening avocado and cacao collections elsewhere, Hawaii is the island and the place where they are duplicating all of those collections and slowly moving them over there and planting them, because these are crops that you can't store the seed long term. You have to grow them to keep them alive. And so as we were touring around, we see avocado and cacao collections and fields that are ready to take on more. And so dozens and dozens of these, just varieties that are, indigenous to certain areas or just not planted widely, but we still don't want them to go away. They're all finding a home in Hawaii. So I, for one, rest easier knowing that avocado and cacao diversity is in good hands and safe in Hawaii as well as elsewhere.
Well, thank you. Special thanks to all you amazing panelists. Virginia Gewin, I'm just amazed that you are so passionate about your work that you left the beach to go.
I left the beach. I only gave it 3 hours.
Bank.
Yep.
I'm always in awe of your work, and now I'm even more in awe of your commitment to your work. Tove Danovich, you are an expert on food crime, and we're going to have to talk about that in an upcoming episode. Is there any food crime you'd like to quickly tell us about before we go?
I'm trying to think of anything new. I think the biggest one right now, it's kind of an underground crime, but this has been an ongoing issue where there are a lot of Chinese companies that are bidding on some of our really large, like Monsanto, Syngenta, things like that. It's not exactly a crime, but there's definitely some worry that with a monopoly of that size that controls the vast amount of our food that's grown, the fertilizer that grows it, the companies that make the machinery that grow the food, that we could be in for some trouble in our food security in the future. So that's a very widespread, someone should make a thriller about this, probably a kind of crime, but keep your eyes peeled.
Maybe you.
Universal Pictures, talking to you.
And Juno DeMelo, I don't want to bring it down here, but I read your piece on In-N-Out Burger in Food and Wine, and it made me cry. And I think,
thank you.
I think everyone should read it. It seems ironic to say it's a piece about In-N-Out Burger, and you're sobbing at the end. So I was just so touched by it. So I'm getting misty even mentioning it. So everyone go look up Juno's article. It's really a kind of a personal memoir, and it was touching. Okay, I'm okay now. Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. You can read all about us on the OPB website. Our producer is Alex Ward. Special thanks to OPB sound supervisor Stephen Cray. And our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. If you like our James Beard Award-winning show, please help us out. Rate us on iTunes, subscribe to The Four Top on your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends about us. You can tweet us at @4top, all one word, or visit our Facebook page and post your thoughts about the show. We would love to hear from you. Bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.
If I'm eating for two, do I need to tip for two?